So, hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of the podcast What the Field. It's a podcast by Crowd Farming where we talk about how to change our food system and build a more sustainable supply chain in general. So today we're super excited. We're joined by Reniera O'Donnell from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And I actually saw you speak at Change Now in 2024. And I think from that moment, I was already thinking, wow, it would be really great to have you on the podcast to kind of talk about your work and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's big project. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited for the conversation.
Great. So before we get into all of the serious stuff, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into this space and what your journey has been so far leading up to joining the Ellen MacArthur Foundation?
Sure. So I am originally from South Africa, where I went to school and I went to university and I did a Bachelor of Science in Zoology and Environmental and Geographical Science, so very much based in life sciences. I then moved to the UK and did not use anything to do with my degree for the next 18 years, where I actually worked in local government in social housing, which it feels like it's not connected, but actually kind of keeping roots in how do we make a food system accessible to even those who, their biggest priority is not having a roof over their head is something that I've really held on to. Six years ago, I decided that I wanted to have a career change. And I wish I had some amazingly intellectual story to tell you, but I don't. I was sitting in bed one night and a friend of mine who works at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation put a post on Facebook saying they were looking for a project manager in the fashion team. And my hobby is sewing. And I thought, I can do that. And so I got in touch and, very quickly was clear that was not the right role for me. But actually, in having conversations around the kind of work that I was doing at the time in economic regeneration in local government, particularly working on the role of higher education, and the foundation was looking for somebody to come and pick up their higher education program, I entered the foundation 6 years ago to lead the formal education program. So really looking at how do you train people and embed circular economy into curricula from like tiny little human beings all the way up to professional development. 3 years ago, I kind of felt I needed a change, and the food lead role came up, and I've always been passionate about it. I grow vegetables in my own garden. I dusted off my life sciences degree, which, having done that in Africa, which is perpetually traumatized through droughts and floods and various climatic issues, and has been long before climate change became, such a big issue. It was really helpful. And so I took on the food program 3 years ago, and I have been doing that ever since.
That's so exciting.
Great Amazing. Story. And Reniera, what's the key focus for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and how is it in any way related to food?
So for anyone who doesn't know who we are, so the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is it's a charitable foundation, and we have a single mission, and our mission is to accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And what that means, in case you're not familiar with it, the way the economy works today, we take stuff out of the ground, we make stuff with it, and ultimately, despite all of our best efforts, the majority of that stuff, whether it is organic in food or technical in other materials, ends up in waste, being in landfill or incineration. And food, and where we want to move to, is an economy where we're kind of decoupling economic growth from the use of finite and virgin materials, and we want to move to an economy where actually we're seeing waste as a design flaw. So we want to design out waste at the start of the process. When we have to use materials, we want to make sure that we're using them for as long as possible. So we're circulating them at the highest possible value. And most importantly, we want to move to an economic model that regenerates nature. And I think it's that last bit where, the connection to food is so huge. Food is responsible for 30% of greenhouse gas emissions and for like 90% of human-induced biodiversity loss, massive land use change and degrading of our natural ecosystems. But actually, we see it as a huge opportunity as well, because if we designed a system that has been really not great, as humans, we're not stupid. We can redesign a system, and actually we could design a food system that is entirely about regenerating the natural systems on which is 100% reliant. So really, it's about one of the most powerful ways we can regenerate nature, which is an absolutely core principle of the kind of economic model that we are working towards.
So that's kind of the thing that I really want to talk about today as well, which is the Big Food Redesign Challenge, right? So that's kind of what you're talking about. Can you walk us through how this challenge came about? And you've just finished the last phase in May, right? So
yes,
maybe there are some. It would be great to hear like what the hangover feelings are from ending the project.
Of course. I mean, it has honestly been like a career highlight project to work on. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has worked in the food space for a long time. And traditionally, when we started out looking at food as a bit of a material flow, and particularly through urban areas, in recognizing that by 2050, the majority of the human population is going to live in cities. It's where the largest concentration of food comes in, where organic waste is created, etc. And so we did a lot of work with cities around the world, some really flagship cities in Sao Paulo, London, and New York, and did a lot of great work. And through that, really started to understand kind of that huge potential that food has in regenerating natural systems. And so the next phase of work started to look at, okay, well, what are the drivers behind what we plant, how we plant it, what we raise, how we raise it, what we fish, how we fish it, etc., and pulled that right back to basics. So when a food company decides to make a chocolate bar, a cereal, a loaf of bread, fresh fruit and vegetables, every decision that goes into those products is a design decision. Now, we don't normally think about food as being designed, but it 100% is. I'm going to grow apples. Well, what kind of apples are you going to grow? How are you going to package them? How do you get them to the consumer? They're all decisions. And so we started to really look at what are the opportunities in thinking through how food is designed that might actually lead to a catalytic shift across the supply chain that sends a signal to farmers that says, do you know what? You are going to be valued for doing something better with the land that's much more in line with nature. And so in 2021, we released a report called the Big Food Redesign. And in that, we developed what we call the Circular Design for Food framework, which was really saying that if you take 4 design strategies, which are regenerative production, lower impact, diverse, and upcycled, and you use those to guide your decision making around the kinds of ingredients that you select and source for your products, we will have significantly better outcomes for nature. So we wrote the report, we developed a framework, we did some modeling, and the modeling started to show that actually, if you use this framework, you can have much better outcomes for soil health, biodiversity, farmer economics, and quite crucially for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But that's just modeling and it's theory. And so we really wanted to find a way to bring this to life and to test it. Not just the modeling had only been done in the UK and the EU on a very small select number of ingredients, wheat, potatoes, dairy, and the upcycled opportunity of sweeteners. So we wanted to see if it held true. And so the Big Food Redesign Challenge was born as a way of catalyzing global food manufacturers and saying, in a way, kind of like we dare you, we dare you to take this framework and apply it to food that you're either designing or food that you have that you might redesign. We will support you through measuring that, through creating collaborative working environments, and crucially, we would support them to get those products to market. And so in May 2023, we launched the Big Food Redesign Challenge. And at the time, Waitrose, a UK retailer, had taken this incredible leap of faith with us. And they'd said, sure, we'll come on board. We will, guarantee that we will look at the product and we will offer shelf space to a selection of the successful products. We worked with the Sustainable Food Trust to make sure that we absolutely had the credibility around farmers and different farming models and different farming practices. And they were, hugely instrumental in helping us assess what came through the project. And we also then knew we needed to use a quantitative data system, which we all know where data is at the moment. It's like it's variable at the best of times. But we worked with How Good through their Lattice platform as being kind of the world's largest food data sustainability platform. And being able to have a single data platform against which we measured everything meant we could get some really credible data out. And so we launched in May 2023 with no real idea if we would take part. And And what was amazing is that very quickly it gathered momentum, and we had over 400 organizations apply to take part. Now, only 232 of those, so I mean, I say only, that was a huge amount, were actually companies that made food. So we accepted them into the challenge, and over a 2-year period worked with those companies in specialist webinars on different themes within either the framework or regenerative agricultural practices or financing. We had a digital community platform that they were all able to talk to each other. And we helped them kind of develop up their thinking and apply circular design for food to their chosen food products. So we closed the application for product designs in October 2023. And I mean, I'll never forget sort of the others in the team and I were working on this, and the end date came and we thought, well, we've got a month for people to get these in. And then nothing happened. And then nothing happened again. And then we were like, oh my God, we've done all this work and we have no idea how many people are going to apply. And we'd originally thought we'd like to have 100 products. And we were absolutely blown away that we had 181 different design applications that came through. We then obviously had a robust assessment process. And out of that, we identified that 141 of those products from 57 companies and across 12 countries of every kind of geography and every kind of agricultural practice really were designed for nature to thrive. And what's been amazing about the project is not only have a number of those gone on to be successful in gaining supermarket shelf space, and we keep seeing more and more being picked up by supermarkets, particularly here in the UK, but the data has categorically shown that by applying these design decisions, these products are at least 18% better off for nature than their industry standard equivalents. So yeah, it's been an amazing roller coaster journey. But we've gotten to a place now where we can absolutely say that if you take circular design strategies through the circular design for food framework and use those to guide your ingredient sourcing and selection when you are designing food and drink products, those products will come out as much better off for the natural ecosystems from which those ingredients were drawn.
So when you're talking about products, you're talking about something like all of this 140, I think you said, products are products that you can find in a shelf in Waitrose, right?
So not all 140 of them. I mean, a
Okay.
number of them weren't producing at a scale big enough to be able to service supermarket chains like Waitrose. So in the UK, Waitrose, Abel and Cole, and Fortnum and Mason have all each selected a number of them.
Okay.
And in Latin America, Carrefour Brazil and Quitando have selected a couple of them. A number of them sell their products through farm stalls or through their own platforms. So I guess all of the products are products that you can in some way, shape or form get hold of and either eat or drink today.
Okay, so it's not like this, like a project. It's a specific product that reaches the end consumer so in some way or another. Yeah.
100%, because I think, we were really clear that it's all very well to have innovative designs and products, but actually if those products don't sell, you're never going to shift the system, right? And we knew we had to have that pathway to actually, are consumers going to engage and are they going to enjoy these kinds of products? And so it was really important for us in order to be able to then because we could take theoretical learnings from any of the designs and say, hey, the data is all showing it's really good, but actually unless those products are starting to replace other products that we currently have in the system, it remains in theory and it remains in a pilot. So for us, that kind of final step of making sure that there was a route to market and these products were selling was really important. And I think it's important to say, like in the same way as not every product that's ever developed everywhere in the world is successful, we will see different success rates for various products within the challenge.
And so what is the kind of like the consumer's role in all of it? And you guys study why the consumer has chosen that product over the like mainstream version, and is that to do more with packaging or kind of the storytelling that you've done around it, or did you get any insights on why that choice was made to prioritize these products that are part of the challenge?
So there is a challenge. There's a challenge in the challenge. There's some difficulty in that because we can market anything to anybody, right? And I think it's the longevity of the products on shelf that will really start to tell the story, because ultimately I think the feedback that we get is consumers are still going to pick more on price and taste and quality, right? If they might buy it for all the right reasons, because the marketing is good, the storytelling is good, they want to do the right thing, but if it doesn't taste nice, or if it's too far out of a price bracket, they're not going to go back to repeat. So the products have been on shelf in Waitrose since February, Abel and Coles since more recently, Fortnum & Mason since February, and in Latin America since more recently than that. And so we're still in the process of kind of getting all the data back and really understanding what is going to be the longevity, what is it that customers have liked about the product. So we're not really, I can't give you a definitive answer on that now, but that is certainly part of the learnings that we will be taking out and working with our retailers going forward.
Yeah, super exciting.
Yeah. And is it more expensive to produce in this way? Because I totally get the part about not, you cannot go too far out of the price range, because then, and it's a lot of, we see it often that when you ask people to go regenerative, or in the, when you talk in events about regenerative agriculture, people always talk about selling more expensive, and it's not something we necessarily agree on. We agree on having a fair price, but not just because you grow regeneratively. It means that you have to add a premium, because then it has to make sense, not just the regenerative tag. Is it more expensive? And yeah.
So we've had a real range, right? So some of the products were not put on shelf because the retailers went, actually, you're too far above our price point. I think all of the products that got onto shelf are with retailers who've gone, that is within the realms of the same price point as other products on the shelf. So I think we're in that mid-range market. There are also some products in the challenge which have been on shelves for years, and the price point has not changed as a result of some of the ingredient selection and sourcing. So there's some coffees, there's particular chocolate bars, and that price point has stayed the same. I think, I don't think the consumer should bear the cost of this. I think there's a realism between where we are today with the cost of food and where we need to be, and there's a journey to get there. But I think, I shared with you that I come from this background of working in social housing, so working with people who, their Maslow's hierarchy of needs isn't being met. They will never be in a luxury space to be able to say, oh, I can pay the premium. Well, certainly not when I was trying to support them. And I think I hold that really tightly. If we can't get to a space where a more diverse regenerative food system is affordable for everybody, then we're never going to change the system. And so I think it was really good to see within the range of challenge products a real range in there, and that in fact included some own brand stuff from the retailers. Some of their own brand products, which we know own brand seems to be taking a bit of a lead at the moment over brands, because it's often at a cheaper price point. So I think I have hope that we will get to a stage where, the food system, a better food system, is available to all. I think, like I said, I think there's a bit of a financial reality gap at the moment from where we are to where we need to be.
I think a topic that is really interesting to me, also because it's different to a lot of conversations we've been having, or a topic at least we haven't covered, is the diversity piece. I think I read in some of your documentation that 40% of agricultural land is influenced by the top 10 FMGs and retailers.
Yep.
And also that 4 crops provide 60% of the world's calories. These two numbers, how do we read them? Are they bad news? Are they hopeful news? Because if one of these they change a big part of the food system. How should we read it?
So I think, those statistics are not a shining example of where we want to be in the food system, right? I think if you look further in our report, there's some scary statistics around, the 4,500 varieties of potato. I think, we eat like 5, right? And we know that there are huge links to our gut health with the lack of diversity out there. So I think we need to recognize that the monopoly over the very few types of foods that we eat and in the hands of a few companies is not good. However, going back to your, is this an opportunity? 100%. Because if we can get those that are, kind of leading the food system at the moment to really introduce diverse ingredients into the products that we know, love, and trust them for already, then the influence that has on that 40% of agricultural land is massive, and the influence that it has on gut health and soil health and all that kind of stuff. So we've got to read it as, I don't think that's something to be celebrated, really. But actually, we really say that is where the opportunity is, because if we can switch that, and there's no point in just shouting at the problem, right? Like, we can't just shout at the problem and think it'll change. Actively supporting and working with companies to get them through to including more diverse ingredients in food products is going to be absolutely transformational.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the products that you were working with, what are some examples of them and how do they relate to the farmers as well? Because they're all processed products, right? They're not like apples or oranges or this type of thing. So they're all processed, packaged, and marketed products. How are you able to trace that back to the farmers, and what was kind of your assessment as you were choosing them?
So I think it's probably important to note that it was a really specific decision to exclude single ingredient products. And the reason is quite basic. I was like, well, I can grow a regenerative carrot in my own garden, right? From a design and a food design perspective, that's not the world's most exciting story. What we wanted to show was that when it comes to like more complex products, actually, there is significant opportunity when they start to rethink how ingredients come together and therefore what kind of ingredients they are. And that doesn't mean that we diminish the amazing work that needs to happen so that all of our food comes from regenerative farming practices, but we just had to pick a specific entry point. So I think it's probably important to say that. So the way that we assessed them is they were assessed on 8 metrics using How Good's data platform. So that was greenhouse gas emissions, both on farm and in processing, soil health, biodiversity, land use, water use, labor risk, and animal welfare. So they were assessed against those 8 data points, and every product had to meet a minimum threshold of those data points to even kind of begin to have further unpicking. But we also know that that's not always primary on-farm data. In fact, in most cases, it isn't, because not every farm has measured its data or inputted it into a system anywhere. And certainly, we were working with farmers in Kenya and the Amazon, and so these systems, were not part of what they were working with at the time. So we knew we had to supplement that. So part of why we worked really closely with the Sustainable Food Trust was that we used their global farm metric, which is an outcomes-based framework, which is very much farmer and land-based, farm-based. And we used that to help guide conversations. And our teams had in-depth conversations with every single manufacturer and producer that entered the challenge to understand where their ingredients came from, what were the farming systems in which those ingredients were grown. We made them track through their supply chains, which came with a huge amount of difficulty for some organizations, because it was really quite hard to then track through their supply chains. We saw supply chains being changed in order to be able to meet the criteria that we set. And so we had a really robust approach to not only looking at quantitative data, but recognizing that quantitative data is actually not going to give you on-farm data in most cases. So we supplemented that with expert-led guided conversations and gathering stories around the farming methods for all of the ingredients in the products.
Okay.
Yeah. Super cool.
And who are these companies, organizations that applied, and what was in for them? Like having access to a new market, getting advice and support from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. What's in it for them? Yeah.
So I think there were a lot of things in it for them. So I think it's important to say we had companies of every size. So we had the Nestle's of the world down to beloved chocolate, which is a single producer, in very small batches, and everything in between. We were working with a producer in Kenya who is making biscuits and juice out of cactus, which is an invasive species in Kenya, but of course, so the farmers pull it out, but of course then that degrades the land even further. So he's working with farmers to give them a value for these plants, and so they keep them in the ground and they prevent more desertification. We were working with farmers in the Amazon, or gatherers in the Amazon, who are utilizing kind of really traditional ingredients in things like protein powders and drinks, etc. So honestly, we were working with such a range of size of organization. And I think what was in it for them was different for all of the different kinds of organizations. But some of the things that we know were really exciting was the potential of a route to market through the retailers who joined the challenge. So that was definitely a really a good incentive to be involved. I think then the collaborative and supportive environment that we offered and the expert advice that we offered was also seen as a really good incentive to be involved. And certainly, I think there is, I'd like to think there is some kudos in working with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We've got a good name out there for really supporting an economic model that is regenerative by design. So I think there were, different reasons for different companies, and not every company that got involved from the start ended up submitting a product design. Not all of those product designs that were submitted ended up being successful. And so people came through the process, and we know that there were some companies that came into the process, they did the whole learning journey, the timing wasn't right for them to submit a design. And so they've now come back to us later and gone, oh, you really helped influence our thinking behind how we can really change an entire supply chain, or how we're going to ask our suppliers more questions, or the kinds of design brief that we're going to change to make sure that nature is very much considered as part of that. So I think we've seen some really incredible outcomes from the whole project, and people have gotten a whole range of different things out of it.
And did the process always involve change, or there were people that had such an amazing ideas that the product was ready to market under your in that shelf of regenerative? And
so again, we had some designs that were completely, totally and utterly new because somebody had been inspired by the Big Food Redesign and the Circular Design for Food framework, and they used that to guide their next product innovation. So absolutely, there were some products that had never been thought of and were created through this process, all the way to other products that didn't actually have to be changed at all, but that were already compliant. And then I think being part of this wider cohort where we're helping to tell the story of why these products are better for nature was very useful, rather than individual companies trying to get that message across themselves. And we've heard from companies that is really difficult. And so this also offered a bit of a space for those organizations to have, to handhold with the others, and have their products being part of a collection that together is seen as being significantly better off for nature.
And so now that the project has sort of come to a close in May, what's next? What what are you going to do with all of this information? And as you continue gathering data and stuff, what's in the pipeline for the future?
So we have, a week, maybe 10 days ago, we released a whole new, what are we calling it, like a hub of information on our website, which really starts to help companies get started, make it happen, what are the challenges that might come up and how might you overcome that. So we've got a whole wealth of information on lessons learned, good practice, how to get off the ground, what you might think about, etc., to really help the sector move. And so that tells all the case studies, and it shares the journey that we've been on. So that's one thing that we've done that is going to be there for longevity. I think, we continue to work with the retailers as they have these products on shelf. And like I said earlier, it'll be interesting as we gather data around consumer engagement with them. What does that mean? How do we How do we keep them engaged in the catalog? Because we developed an online catalog of all of these products. And certainly what we've seen is that retailers, as various products have kind of reached either seasonally they've come on board, we've seen the retailers then pick those up and add them to their products on shelf, and we'd like to be able to continue to do that. There's a couple of pieces that we know we need to double down on. So we've heard from particularly the larger companies that are moving from a more linear model to a circular one, rather than those that have been set up to be purpose-led or circular from the beginning. We know that there is a huge ambition to do this, but often things get stuck in making the internal financial business case to move away from business as usual. And so we've actually just kicked off a collaborative project using some of the participants from the challenge and a number of large, fast-moving consumer goods companies within our network to really look at how can we help unlock making the internal business case for including circular design for food as a change in the way that products are being designed. So we've got that piece of work that's ongoing, and we hope to release the findings from that in about October this year. The other piece that we know is missing is the enabling policy conditions, right? So what are the conditions that governments how can governments use policy to be able to create the right conditions so that circular design for food, when it is embedded, has a chance of flying? So things like, it is often very, very difficult to bring upcycled ingredients to market as novel ingredients. So there's huge amounts of hurdles and red tape. So how can we think about unlocking that? And so, we've just actually received, we're really excited, we've just received funding from the Louders Foundation to, over the next 12 months, really lean into what we've learned from what are the policy leverage points that we can talk about, and in which regions would those make most sense to really make sure that circular design for food is embedded in policy frameworks. So those two kind of pieces of work are now just kicking off, and that's over the next 12 months. And as well as that, because obviously we like to keep really busy, we are looking to really supercharge the challenge in the US. So it's had great traction, particularly in the UK and Latin America. We had 10 phenomenal US participants, but weren't able to find a retailer in the US. And we know that there is huge potential for embedding circular design for food to significantly help shift what's happening at land level. And so we are just starting to think about how we can supercharge this on the other side of the pond.
Nice. Super. And I would also like to cover a topic that we haven't covered for a long time, that it's, I guess, very dear to you, that it's packaging, and really close to the mission of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. How did you go about packaging, and is it similar in all of the different products? Because I guess the approach should be really similar with processed food, right?
Oh, no, not really. So I think, it's always funny when you set up a challenge, everybody wants the challenge to solve everything, right? And we knew that we couldn't do that. So the primary aim of this challenge was to show that different design decisions in ingredient sourcing and selection can have significantly better outcomes for nature. But we also know, as you rightly say, we're the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, probably best known for our work in plastics. We cannot be promoting products that are packaged in a way that we would not see as part of a circular economy. And so while we didn't include packaging in the overall quantitative data analysis, it was part of the qualitative analysis, and we were really clear on what packaging would and wouldn't be accepted. So it had to be at a minimum recyclable, and properly recyclable, not this is in theory recyclable, but no recycling system, is available for it. No flexible packaging. So we were very clear that there was a red line below which we would not accept packaging. But because it wasn't the focus of the challenge, we didn't include it in the quantitative data analysis. And one would argue that when it comes to quite a lot of food products, the best packaging is no packaging at all, and that is then highly dependent on the retail system in which the product goes. However, we saw some really innovative stuff coming out. So just a couple of examples. There's an amazing drink that's come out of Mexico, which is a tequila alternative. So it's made from the agave plant, but rather than harvesting the whole agave and taking it out of the soil, it's made from the sap of the agave. So the agave stays in the ground and therefore much better for soil health. And the company that made that has been working with local craftsmen, and the drink is sold in a clay bottle. So it is promoting local jobs, it's keeping the local culture alive, and clay is, eminently recyclable and reusable anywhere, really. So, that was a really fantastic example. And I think what was so beautiful about that is how beautiful the bottles are. So actually, from a consumer experience, that really enhances the value that you add to the product, because you can use the bottle for so many things afterwards, and you're very unlikely to just chuck it away. So that was a lovely example. There was another company that made a pancake mix, and so they were making that from fava bean flour. So rather than using wheat flour, one of those four ingredients that our diet is based on, they were using fava beans. Now, I'm sure you know that beans are unbelievably great for soil health. So they were using fava bean flours to make a pancake mix. And the internal packaging that your pancake mix came in was made of dissolvable seaweed. So the primary packaging, that you would put your pancake mix in the packaging, in a bowl, add your liquid, and it would dissolve in that. So you're actually dissolving your packaging as part of the nutrient profile of what you're eating, because it's got seaweed in it, which has its own nutrient profile, and obviously doing away with that primary plastic packaging. And the outer packaging was in cardboard. We've seen some really great movement towards more paper-based packaging. Companies have struggled through many challenges with that. So I don't think it's fair to say that you would expect the same outcome. I think there are many ways in which packaging fit for a circular economy can be interpreted. And we certainly saw some really great examples coming through the challenge.
And now there we are on that you mentioned that you're best known for plastic, a topic that we normally have here. It's this debate around plastic. Is it really a material that we should demonize, or is it something that serves a big purpose if used correctly, that it's something many times we don't do?
So I don't think we are we are not in the demonizing plastic space. The right plastic for the right use in the right system, it is an absolutely amazing substance. I mean, the challenge is that we have too much of the wrong kind of plastic used in the wrong way and ending up in the wrong place. I think we are super clear that we will never recycle our way out of the problem. And so just simply by saying, oh, I'm using the right plastic and it's recyclable, is not going far enough. And so when I said to you, like, the best solution is no packaging at all, but that is really hard to get to. And it would be lovely to get to that place. So I think very definitely plastic is an amazing thing. It shouldn't be demonized, but we absolutely need to recognize that there is just too much of the wrong kind of plastic used in the wrong way that ends up in the wrong place.
Yeah, I love this idea of dissolvable seaweed packaging as an alternative. If we can manage to get that mainstream, that would be crazy. And so also, like, on the consumer side, did you guys run any kind of like awareness campaigns, or like did you get consumers involved in any way as well, like through advertising or through campaigns?
So sort of. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, like, our primary audience is not is business and policymakers and academia, not necessarily your general consumer. So this was all new space for us. But what we did do is we worked very closely with an organization called Viper. So Viper do consumer testing in real life on various different things to do with food. And so what we did is we did a lot of testing with them on, what do you call these kind of products? So we ended up kind of putting them all under the banner of Nature in Mind. So we tested that. We tested various different product iterations along the way, and we got Viper to offer that testing capability to the participants in the UK, so they were all able to test their product ideas, with a live market audience. We've done an awful lot of publicity around this. So there's been I mean, our launch was picked up in 200 different media outlets across 10 or 12 countries within a week. Waitrose have been amazing at doing double page spreads in their weekend magazine. We've done podcasts, we've done a video reel, but it was never we never set out to try and engage consumers ourselves. It was very much around how do we work with our retailers to be able to do that. So I think we've done more than we would normally do, and certainly, I mean, it is really interesting when people come up who I know but don't necessarily know what I do and they're like, "You were in the Waitrose magazine. This is so cool. It's so amazing. I'm going to go out and find these products." So we know that people are recognizing the foundation's name. They're recognizing, people who've worked on the project. Recognizing some of the big brands, and so they're very definitely there is knowledge getting out there. But we are very reliant on the retailers that we've been working with to help us spread the word.
Amazing. Yeah. And if it's possible, and Reniera, I guess you're still working with fashion, right?
I am, yeah. I've just actually, so 6 months ago, my remit expanded, and I'm now responsible for both food and fashion. So newer into the fashion space.
And could you do a super short summary of what's going on in that side?
Yeah, of course. So the big project that we're working on in our fashion program at the moment is called the Fashion Remodel. I think this is super exciting, and I think it's going to be truly revolutionary. Basically, we've got 13 companies from high end to high street, all working together to answer the question, how do we make money without making new clothes? So really exciting, looking at how do we make it economically viable to have more repair, more rental systems, more remaking, and more reselling. We're seeing the rise of resale platforms in peer-to-peer going massively, which is amazing. And I think we're seeing some companies going, oh, there's quite a lot of our own stuff in there that, there's quite a lot of value to be taken out. And so actually I was at Global Fashion Summit last week in Copenhagen, where we shared the first year of that project's insights. So we've looked at how do you help make the business case to introduce more of these models like repair, remaking, reselling, remanufacture, etc. And we've looked at it with a climate lens. So how can you use climate? How can you bring together circular business models and climate to help make a much stronger financial business case? And we shared our insights on our website. So there's a hub and guide that people can go to. And I think it is really interesting, because the more we can, I think across food and fashion and like a number of other fiber-based or bio-based materials, I think a lot of the time we forget that land is our biggest commodity here, right? And so I think what's really exciting about the fashion remodel is if we can get circulation of what is currently out there, regardless of whether it is a biomaterial or a synthetic material or a blend, we're really going to significantly reduce pressure on land to grow or raise more fibers for the textile industry. And I think, that is going to become increasingly important. So I am super excited about this project. It's going on for the next 2 years. And I think, if we can get to a place where these 13 fashion companies they've all committed to a percentage of revenue increase in the use of circular business models. If we can show that this is absolutely doable, that is going to be transformational for the sector.
Yeah. Sounds
so exciting.
Yeah, super exciting.
And so cool to be tackling these two worlds as well, kind of in parallel, right? Because I think we forget really often that they're so linked, and that actually, if you bring it back to the original source, they just are based on the same system, right? They both are heavily reliant on farmers and production methods. So it must be cool to be able to tackle that.
It is absolutely. There's that whole they're reliant on the same, whether it's land or whether you are extracting for it. It's very much earth based. But I think the other thing for me, and I think this really is coming out more and more strongly, is that there is for both food and fashion, there is a basic need, and then there's the stuff we like to have, right? So there's that whole bit around need and desire. And it's the desire part that gets us into all sorts of spaces of trouble. And I think I'm really excited about the potential of how do we reshape desire. So what we are desiring is inherently circular by nature. And that for me feels like if we can get this right across the two things that we have in our everyday lives, then as a consumer, your experience starts to shift and change, right? And then we start to drive the system more because we're asking for experiences that are inherently circular, either by virtue of them having regenerative provenance or because the system that they're in is circular by nature. And I think that is really becoming super clear to me, like, you know, that kind of that experience and desire in what you eat and what you wear. It's cultural. It's how you show who you are as a person. It's totally embedded in every part of our lives. And I think I'm super excited about where these two can come together and really start to shift that.
Yes, it's a conversation that comes to mind every now and then in the podcast, like either the redefinition of quality or the redefinition of the experience versus the goods you need to have, things like this, that and making it more desirable. That sometimes we expect people to do the right thing when it's the expensive thing or the boring thing or the thing we don't want to do, and it's on us to actually redefine the experience and make it amazing, desirable, and at a price you can afford to actually get people to buy in, because if not, it's going to be a tough journey.
100%. And I think, you know, sectors are trying to do it on their own, which is hard, right? So you've got individual companies trying to do it on their own within individual sectors, where even where there is collaboration, it's hard, particularly as we were saying, food and fashion are so intrinsically linked at land level, and you can add paper-based fibers and all sorts of things into that as well. And I think there is huge potential in a cross-sectoral approach to this shifting of desire and reshaping. How do we fulfill desire and want and need in a way that is inherently circular, like you say, without it necessarily being a conscious choice that a consumer can only make if they find themselves in the right system, knowing the right thing, and with enough money in their back pocket to pay for it.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. Cool. I feel like that could be a whole other podcast, actually, like how to shift people's desires and redefine value.
We are moving in that direction and shaping up how we might step into that space. So maybe call me back in a year and I'll let you know how we get on.
Sounds good.
That would be great. And yeah, so we usually also like to finish off the podcast with these two more lighthearted and fun questions, and one of them is to get some insight on what you're reading or consuming at the moment in terms of information. Is there like a book or a film or a song or a documentary that you've read or seen recently that you would recommend to our listeners?
So I was going to give a film, which is the biggest little farm, because I just think it is the most wonderful thing to watch.
Yeah.
But actually, yesterday I got sent the next chapter in a book called Mise. So Mise is a book written by Mike Lee, who is a food futurist. If you don't know who he is, look him up. He's amazing. I would highly recommend reading his book, Mise. He takes us on a journey through 4 different food futures. One is on AI, one is on weight loss drugs, one is on regenerative, and one is on something else that I can't remember right now. And I haven't read the next chapter. It landed yesterday. And I think, we often have an idea of what a future food system should look like. And I think he's very good at helping us think through that as an end state projection and whether that is really where we want to get to or not. And I would highly recommend reading Mise by Mike Lee.
Great.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
That's a great option. And Big Little Farm is also one of my favorite films ever. So
I will probably get shot if I don't also say, we've got a huge number of podcasts and really interesting video and film material on the website. There's a whole podcast series related entirely to the Big Food Redesign Challenge, which is really cool to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will do.
Also a very good recommendation. And so the last question is kind of in line with the name of our podcast, because it happens to us a lot to, as we work in this space, to see something and to think, oh, what the fuck? How is this possible? Like, this can't be what's going on right now. And so maybe like also in line with the Big Food Redesign Challenge, is there like one piece of data or one statistic that has just really hit you with a like, oh, what the field is going on?
I think there's so much bad data out there, right? And I could tell you that they're all quite shocking. But I'm going to spin this a little bit, and I'm going to be like, through the Big Food Redesign Challenge, like, we have really proved how powerful food design can be. And I guess what the field is like, why the field are people not doing this already?
Yeah. Shifting the way that they design.
Yeah. Was that a cheat answer? Sorry.
No, usually we spin it. I went down a particularly negative line today, but usually we do spin it in a positive. It can be positive or negative. So thank you for catching me on that. Great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Reniera. It was an amazing conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the project is so cool, the Big Food Redesign Challenge, and I think it's something that everybody should be looking into and getting inspired by, because it was such a cool project to happen. So yeah, congratulations.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And like I said, yes, it is a really cool project. Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. Everyone should be able to. It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Reniera.